Today on the CEO Barbecue, we're looking for uranium, both in the Athabasca and in the Thelon Basin, together with Baselode Energy. And if you want a bullet point summary of this conversation and all the other CEO barbecues in your inbox once a week, go to resourcetalks.com and subscribe to our free newsletter. Now, the company you're about to hear from has paid us for the production of this video, which means that this is not research, it's an advertisement, and you should treat it as such. Research is conducted by reading the company's official filings, which you can find on setterplus.ca. And please only watch this if you absolutely know what you're doing. This interview is intended only for experienced junior mining speculators because mineral exploration, development, and mining is a very tough business where failure is the norm and should be the expectation. This is going to be a conversation that is general and impersonal in nature, containing forward-looking statements. I am not a licensed financial advisor, and my business sells content-producing services, which also makes me biased in multiple ways. So before continuing on, please talk to an independent investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital might be at risk. If you're not 100% sure you understand 100% of the disclaimers I just showed you, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said therein. That all said, Baselode Energy is listed as FIND, so that's FIND on the TSX Ventures Exchange. And this is where I normally give you a company overview, providing sort of the trading data as well as going through the company's financials and everything. But first of all, James and I have had numerous conversations over the last couple of years, so no company overview needed from that perspective, but also because Baselode might not be around for much longer, given that they've now proposed a 55-45 merger with Forum Energy to form a new company, which, if approved by shareholders, will go forward under the name Geiger Energy. They call this a merger of equals, or well, almost equals to 55-45 there, but essentially Baselode's taking over Forum Energy at no premium in an all-paper deal. So it's an all-share deal that would create a company with now, again, a two-basin portfolio. Baselode's Ackio, shallow pods in the Athabasca Basin, and then Forum's Aberdeen target essentially in Nunavut in the Thelon Basin. And we'll talk about both of them later on in the conversation. Dr. Rebecca Hunter will take the helm while James Sykes moves to the technical advisor. Exactly how all of that is going to work is hopefully something I can figure out later on in the conversation as well. Now, this came very unexpectedly to me, and by the looks of it, to a lot of other people out there as well. So, as you can imagine, there's many questions here, and hopefully I'll get to go through all of them here. But first of all, Dr. Rebecca Hunter and James, thank you both for being here today.
Thanks, Antonio.
Pleasure is all mine, but I'm not going to mince words here. Again, this was a surprise to me, and by the looks of the trading volume in both stocks, really, as well as the price reaction on that news, a lot of people seemed unhappy with the merger. Both of you disagree, though, and so I'm hoping you can tell me why that is. And ladies first, Rebecca, why don't you tell me why does this merger make sense right now?
I mean, for Forum, I think what makes sense is that, our Aberdeen project is really important with so much potential on the Aberdeen project, and Baselode, and James in particular, also feels very strongly about the potential of that project. And so, the markets are down, it's hard to raise money, stuff like that. And really, to build any value in any company, you need results. And so this was a really great opportunity for Forum to be able to basically have the capital, because it's basically a merger of, a really prospective project and capital. And so being able to do that is why this merger really makes sense. And that's why I'm really excited about it. And I think shareholders, once we talk about it more and they get comfortable with kind of, what we're doing and what we're planning and what it really means, I think they will get very excited as well.
James, what about you? Why are you in favor of this deal, though? I mean, if you still believe in like the Athabasca 2.0 thesis, which we talked about that just a couple of months ago, you had a webinar on just a couple of months ago. So it didn't seem like you would move away from the Athabasca 2.0 thesis. So why would you go and spend money on another project if you still believe in that thesis?
I'm totally in favor of this. I think this is absolutely wonderful. We haven't moved away from Athabasca 2.0 at all. We're still on that path. We checked Aberdeen checked all of the boxes for baseload, and that includes the whole Athabasca 2.0 idea that we're looking for shallow and near surface mineralization. Forum's Aberdeen project is one of these projects that just it has a lot of potential. and it looks like the Athabasca Basin was back in the 70s, just underexplored. Lots of potential. You've got an area at Aberdeen that looks like it looks like Rabbit Lake to McLean Lake area of the northeast corner of the Athabasca. That's 500 million pounds. So there's a lot of potential, and that's what we're trying to achieve with this, is reward our shareholders with significant returns through discovery potential.
We'll talk about some of the details on that, and some of the details of the Thelon as well as the Aberdeen projects. I really don't know it too well, but I mean, still, the thesis for a long time, or still is that Ackio is good because it could have been brought into production more quickly, okay, if of course there was enough economic mineralization there. But and that's because of infrastructure as well as depth of mineralization, right? It's shallow, as I mentioned, and so on. But with Aberdeen, and again, granted, I don't know the project too well, and hopefully we'll change that by the end of the conversation. But the thesis and the setup does look quite different, specifically because of the logistics up there. So it doesn't seem like this is a quick to produce play as far as I understand it, is it?
No, it's still the play for discovery and potential to build a jurisdiction. Yes, we're close in the Athabasca. We're close to the infrastructure. The Hook project has everything that kind of makes sense. As you mentioned, Ackio is near surface. It's not the most robust size, but the economics still work behind that. That shallow mineralization always rules the day. Any open pit will provide significant returns. Sorry, I shouldn't say any open pit. Open pits have the opportunity to provide significant returns upon being mined. And that's the success that still breeds true at Hook. However, with this Aberdeen project, we see the potential for these larger scale discoveries, things that look like Arrow. They just keep popping out when you look at the geophysics. And that's where we want to build this. That's where we want to build Geiger Energy towards, is this company that can have an Arrow type of deposit in an area that has multiple discoveries already made, and you start building the jurisdiction there. As it stands right now at Aberdeen, the jurisdiction, or what's been defined in that jurisdiction, isn't large enough to warrant building a mill with 20, 30-year plus mine life. You need more. And that's what we're trying to get to, is build that jurisdiction. Because with the demand that we see in the nuclear energy space, demand for uranium is continuing to increase almost on a daily basis, with just new announcements for energy consumption, whether it be AI, we need the energy for AI, or industry out there. More countries are adopting nuclear energy, and we see that trend continuing. China keeps building out, and they need more. They're going to need more fuel. So we know the demand's going to be there. We're not entirely sure where all that supply is going to come from, but we believe if we can make these discoveries, if we can build this jurisdiction out with near surface mineralization, picture Arrow being open pittable. That's a wonderful mine. And that's what we want to achieve. That's what we believe is possible in this area. So if you've got an open pit Arrow, or you've got Key Lake 2.0, which is another 200 million pounds, you've got this area that has the potential to move forward and become established. It's not there yet. This is the Athabasca Basin back in the 60s and 70s. There are a lot of discoveries haven't been made. They're waiting. They're waiting for those discoveries to be made, build that jurisdiction, build the mill in the area. Everything else comes along.
That's it's quite a claim there, and we'll definitely get to talking about that and how you see that happening. But talk to me maybe also about the timing again from both perspectives as well. And James, I'll just start with you because we'll just keep going here. But why now? I mean, Baselode has its own money. You could have just gone and kept drilling Ackio, grow it, go to MRE as we've discussed before. And I don't think you've ever mentioned the Thelon to me before. I might be mistaken now, but why now? Why does this make sense from the perspective of timing?
Well, that's exactly it. It just was timing. Everything, the markets are depressed. Forum's at an all-time low. Baselode's also at an all-time low. We have the cash, and we do believe we've got discovery potential on our Hook project, just south of Ackio, about 10 or 5K, sorry. But we were getting deeper with our drilling, and that gets us out of the Athabasca 2.0 thesis. It's still discovery waiting to happen, but we thought we feel very strongly that we can expedite a discovery and a bigger discoveries, sorry, on this Aberdeen project. And that's really why it made sense at this point, is with Forum being in a distressed state and knowing that they had no capital to explore this wonderful project. We thought it was the right time and right opportunity to really make this happen.
Rebecca, what about yourself? From your perspective, why does this timing, or the timing of this deal make sense now? And it's also just a few weeks after you sold, I believe, a royalty in Aberdeen. Why does the timing make sense for Forum?
I think kind of similar, along the similar lines. So, I mean, the markets have been depressed. To build shareholder value in our Aberdeen project requires capital and quite a bit of capital. To work up in the Aberdeen is helicopter supported. It's a bit more remote than the Athabasca. So, and if we don't do that, then we don't do anything for shareholders. And so that the timing was really that. And then we had the opportunity. The other component of timing is I've been talking about the Thelon for, the last couple of years, the prospectivity, putting it out there. And, people aren't jumping onto that yet. Like a lot of people don't see that. They don't see that it has so much potential, even though I've said it many, many times. And I've been doing this actually for quite a while. So I've recognized this potential since I've been up there, which was, I started up in the Thelon as a kind of entry-level geologist in 2006 or whatever. So, and I guess the timing here is that, James sees it as well. And Baselode came in and they could see that vision. And that is what really changes the timing. And it basically kind of validates, what I've been trying to, promote and show. And then you bring someone like James on, who has, all this knowledge in the Athabasca Basin, has seen some of these tier 1 deposits. And that's really, that's an overused term, but, it's really about that. Aberdeen has the potential to find big deposits of scale and magnitude. And James has seen many of these deposits as well and been a part of those discoveries. So that validation, that knowledge, and the timing as far as, needing capital, that's what brings us all together.
Both of you, have you spoken to some of your larger shareholders, and is it looking like this is going to go through? Is it looking like they're going to vote yes, or what's sort of the sentiment that you're getting out there?
I can start. We have a strategic shareholder who, very much has a vision for Nunavut and the work that we're doing up there. So they're very much on side. And then, the larger shareholders, our whole board supports that. But we have to be able to educate everybody on the change. Of course, it's a big change, for us merging, obviously for Baselode kind of changing, where they want to focus. But for us, I think we have a lot of support. And it's really about building shareholder value. And this is the way to do that.
Right. Yeah. James, what about you? Have you spoken to some of your larger shareholders? What's that looking like?
Everyone's in favor of it. For the vast majority of people that I have spoken to, everyone is in favor of it. Reaction in the market, people fear what they can't understand. So that's why Rebecca and I are doing this call to help people understand and understand that this is something that can build a lot of value for shareholders. We recently put out a video, I think on Friday last week, that just demonstrates what we're really trying to achieve with this. Next Gen 2.0, if you want to call it. A lot of 2.0s in this whole thing. But we see that we can create this value, take it from a company of tens of millions of dollars to billions of dollars through discovery potential. And it's not just this one-off potential. There's plentiful potential out there. Just needs to be drilled. And we've continued on our focus. We want to deliver the best results possible for people, and that's what we're going to do.
People fear what they cannot understand. People don't value what they cannot understand is a good point there, because that's that was my thesis on Baselode before that. And it was like, eventually an MRE is going to come, whatever economics is going to be proven up, and then people are going to get it. But You haven't really made it easier for people to understand with this merger, though, right? I mean, how do you even pitch this from now on out? A lot of retail investors, or at least, again, judging by myself, I've got very limited bandwidth to work with. I've got goldfish memory. So if I see you at a conference for the first time, you only have a few minutes to pitch me on it. What do you tell me, given kind of the whole, the different jurisdictions and everything, different geologies, more or less? So how do you pitch this? How do you make this easy to understand?
Don't worry about the geology. Don't worry about the jurisdiction. Yeah, costs are going to be up a little bit more, but Forum's already done all of the hard lifting, all the legwork behind it. Now it's all up to discovery. Everything's the same. All the targets are the same. Nothing's changed in that regard and how we view things and how we've targeted. And we've been successful at the end of the drill bit with Baselode. So it's just a matter of applying the drill bit to a different location, one that we do see as having quicker returns on investment.
Hmm. So you're gonna essentially stay on and help do that, I suppose. What is it? What's the title that you're getting again?
Technical advisor to the
Okay.
board of directors. So I'll stay on with the board of directors because
Yeah.
I see nothing. Again, I see nothing but big success with this. I've
So you're
got a lot
sticking
of faith
around.
in. Yes, I'm sticking around for sure. I'll be the voice in Rebecca's ear. That's fine. I've got a lot of faith in Rebecca. I've seen her work in the past. Her thesis defense, top notch. I've seen her passion behind this project. I've seen what she's willing to commit to. So I'm 100% behind Rebecca for sure.
Okay.
I will stay on and just again be that voice in the background. I've got a unique eye, I think, and I think I can bring that value to the team.
Hmm. What about Cam though? I mean, Cam's leaving. He was part of the Ackio team and discovering everything. Why is Cam leaving?
Cam is the C in Ackio.
Yeah.
So he's immortalized in that. Why did Cam leave? He got a great opportunity. Like there's no doubt about that. I even helped push him towards making that decision. But he was all for this. He really believed in this merger. He loves the Aberdeen project. But we kept this deal wasn't straightforward. It was on again, it was off again. And I that just it provided uncertainty. And these markets provide uncertainty. So where he left provides that certainty, where he's basically been promised 5 years of exploration drilling at his helm. So he doesn't have to worry about anything for the next 5 years. He's got a young family that provides the stability. In a way, I wish I loved that, but I'm too much of a crazy guy. I like chaos. Uh, I like rolling the dice. Well, that's not even a good term because I think we have better odds of hitting. We do. We have better odds of hitting mineralization than we do rolling the dice and coming up with a seven. So I like to take those opportunities that that I see that can deliver those results. And that's what this is. This is a lucrative moment for baseload shareholders to get behind something that could be monstrous. When I was at Next Gen and we discovered Arrow, nobody believed in it. Nobody believed in it. It took a couple years until people started getting behind Arrow. I'm hoping that since people have learned from that discovery, we can make such a discovery and benefit in a shorter time frame than what NextGen did. I do believe that we can turn this into a monster of a company.
Hmm. Cam, or well, it's not only people on your side of the story leaving. Rebecca, on your end, Rick, the founder of the company, is the founder of Forum, is now leaving. How come? How did that decision come to be?
I was just a part of the transaction. So, I think a big part of what Forum needed to do, even before the baseload, merger came to pass, is that it needed a rejuvenation. And so, we've been in discussions for probably over a year about kind of when to do that, when Rick, would transition, into, a board member or retire, and I would basically take over. So essentially that's been in the works for a while. And again, it comes back to that, Forum, you know, great company, but it's long in the tooth. It's been around for 20 years. It hasn't seen that, crazy amount of success. So, people just it's harder to get investors in that sort of a vehicle. And so it definitely, a rollback was eventually needed for Forum, even if we were going it alone, a management change, a rejuvenation, stuff like that. So really, this merger actually allows us to do that in a much quicker time frame and a much more elegantly, essentially. And that's another big benefit of this merger.
How did that go, by the way? I mean, if I were to have my guess, I wouldn't have guessed that Rick be too happy to leave the company that he founded, all these years ago. But you seem to have made it happen nonetheless. I don't see any frictions or anything like that in the news releases. So what was the pitch to him essentially?
Well, again, like I said, I think this was kind of in the works of me transitioning into the CEO role, and so moving towards this into the merger, it was just kind of a natural fit that I would continue as CEO of this next company, Geiger, and Rick would step back. Again, we're basically, as a part of this merger, we're combining the boards, and so I'm the CEO, and then 2 Forum board members go forward, and then Baselode has 3 board members, and so I mean, there's just limited room to continue. But I think Rick's been very supportive of this. He's very supportive, of the Thelon and moving forward and trying to make that big discovery.
So, how many shares does Rick have? And I suppose he keeps all of them or not? I mean, yeah, how many shares does he have?
Yeah, so I think he has a couple million shares. I think that's what he's accumulated over the years. So yeah, it's a fairly, decent position. I mean, we also have 300 million shares out. But as a part of the management team, him and the other founder, Anthony, have the most shares.
Yeah. Well, so they're gonna no longer be reporting shareholders of the final issuer eventually, I think, is they're not going to be over 9.9% each, right?
No, not even close. No.
That's why I'm asking about how did it go? Like, did it go lightly? Are they happy with the deal? Because obviously you wouldn't want their shares to hit the market the moment this deal closes. So that's essentially where I'm coming from. But also this merger will essentially dilute the already low insider ownership on both sides, specifically from the perspective of both CEOs now of the companies. How do you deal with that? What's the plan to better align insiders with shareholders? Again, I'll ask both of you that question, but Rebecca, we'll start with you.
Yeah, and I think, it's a merger of equals. So, I mean, again, essentially, new entity and we have a little bit less. We have the 45%, the rest, Baselode has 55, but it's a bigger pie. And I mean, as far as the value, yes, shareholders have a little bit of dilution in that. But if we had to raise money, there'd be tons of dilution on our end, basically because we were 5 cents. We are still 5 cents, and we'd have to raise a lot of money. So, I mean, there's the dilution game is on either side. And I think, one, would we be able to raise enough money on our own? I would say likely not in this market. And so you'd get the dilution without actually being able to explore effectively. Mm-hmm. This way we can explore effectively. So that's kind of my answer there.
Yeah. Would you be able and willing to buy shares in the open market though, as that process goes along?
Like myself?
Yeah.
Very much. Yes. I mean, I'm a shareholder of Forum, but not, huge, because of just, every financing I've participated in and built a little bit of a position. And yes, I mean, we're blacked out right now, obviously, but once Geiger goes ahead, I plan on being a big supporter of Geiger because I believe in this thesis.
Well, as James will tell you, I will remember that and I will follow up with you. And that's what I'll do right now, James, with you. You previously told me you'd like to buy some shares in the market. Now that the price has fallen, on the back of that news, is that buying going to be coming anytime soon?
Sooner than you think. I just bought 100,000 shares today.
Okay. Wow. Impressive.
So over the course of June, I bought some options as well. So I've just purchased 350,000 shares in June.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, thanks for following up on your word, I suppose. I think this.
Thank you, Mark, for bringing us down 10 cents. Like I got a lot more out of it than at 14.
That's fair. I wanna I guess this about covers the basics of the merger, if you will. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff, but for people listening, please let me know what I'm forgetting to ask here, and I'll ask it in the next interview. But I want to move on to talking about the new company if and when the merger closes. What's the focus for the company going to be at that point? Not so much project wise. I know you'll be drilling Aberdeen, and we'll talk about that. We'll get to it for sure here in a second. We'll do a bit of the details there, but more from the perspective of what's the business plan long term? How do you make money for shareholders from both basins at the same time?
I think, I mean, again, focus and discovery. And yeah, we're going to be in two basins now, but essentially, that we have a fairly big portfolio. There's a lot of kind of thinking we need to do there, maybe what to keep, what to kind of option off and stuff like that. Potentially, we'll have to see on all that. But, I see summer focus on Aberdeen, and then, winter focus, probably Ackio. They're two best projects, and basically the discovery potential of those two, and then very not, focus on anything else. Like I really believe in a very focused, kind of company strategy, and I think that would be the best bang for our buck, and that's kind of the strategy I want to do going forward.
And I'm thinking more from the perspective of, if there would be an exit here at some point with Baselode, that wasn't too hard to imagine what would happen if, and then again, it's all speculation, but if there was economic mineralization and everything, it's not too hard to imagine who steps in, and there's multiple options as well. What about Aberdeen? What's the business plan there? If it is there and you do discover it, who buys you out?
I think, again, like James kind of alluded to, right now, Orano is up there, and Orano has 133 million pounds, but it's not enough to justify a mill, or even right now to justify them kind of continuing with their project. So there's just kind of in care and maintenance. But I think, I don't know down the road, like who's going to be interested in our project, but I'm certainly, if we can basically build that district scale sort of discovery potential, then who knows? I mean, I'm certainly Orano's going to be very, very interested in, because, they already have assets up there that are sitting there. And back in the day when I worked there with Cameco, like at that time, they had a very big vision for looking outside of the Athabasca Basin. And that was one of the reasons I was there in the first place. And because they were, thinking about pounds in the Athabasca even then, 20 years ago, thinking about how are they going to extract these, what's more economic, and thinking of another kind of uranium district. And so the Thelon was kind of the top of their list at that time. So, you had these other major players, markets change. If we can establish that we've got some monsters up there, I mean, it could be anybody, really.
Well, that's right. And it's, I guess that does make sense. And maybe we'll touch upon that later on as well, because I do want to ask something about the Orano's project up there as well. But maybe you can talk to me more specifically about Aberdeen as a project. And I don't know it too well. What's the history? And I mean, if it is that good, how come, small cap Explorco has it today?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's been in fits and starts. So, I mean, that area, Kigavik or Orano's deposits were basically found in the early 70s. And then their two other deposits were in the 80s. And again, the uranium industry is just full of these ups and downs. And the Thelon was affected by it even harder, just because, it's further out. And so it had a bit of a spurt in the 80s, and that's where they found, in the 70s, they found Kigavik, and then everything basically died. So all the major players were gone. Uranga Cell Shaft, who discovered Kigavik, was still up there. They putzed around, made a few more discoveries, and then nothing again until we got up there, which was around mid-2000s. There's a little bit in the 90s, but not a lot. And then, we had this spurt basically from '06. And then even past '08, it started getting a bit tenuous, but we managed to explore to 2012, but the juniors didn't. So, Cameco was up there, Orano was, kind of developing their mine plan. And all the juniors like Forum, because Forum was up there, and that's kind of keys into why, Forum ended up with the ground that we do, they had a little bit of ground kind of surrounding what I had, or what Cameco had, sorry. But that exploration was done. They basically could drill to about 2009, they were out. We did to 2012, and then we were out. And so you just have this really abbreviated sort of exploration. And some money is spent, but not a lot of good exploration happens when you only have 3 years or 2 years to drill these targets. So, and then I guess you're asking how Forum got it. Well, it was just kind of serendipitously. So Cameco past Fukushima lapsed the ground. So they kept it for a little bit, and then based on their strategy, and I mean I can't speak for their strategy exactly, but they just kind of they're focused in the Athabasca. And so they ended up letting all that ground go that we had, including the 2 discovery deposits we had. And then around 2021, I think Rick was looking at some of his ground that they basically left to lapse and kind of checking on it. And then he realized that all the Cameco ground was open. And so that's kind of where he came in, started staking. And that's where I came in, because he got a hold of me and asked me, what should I stake?
And that's to the credit of Forum for picking all that up and seeing that and maintaining that vision as well for Aberdeen. Rick picking up that project was absolutely wonderful and key. I just want to point out, though, I think your question was unfair, because that's like saying, well, why didn't Cameco or Rano pick up Arrow or Triple R or Hurricane or Ackio or West MacArthur? It's like Hurricane and West MacArthur are both right beside Cameco. They can't control everything. You need the juniors to help the majors make discoveries and come in. Majors can't do it all on their own.
My point here was mostly tied to Cameco actually already had this ground, so why they drop it? And Rebecca already explained that, so that's really where that question came from. But also thinking about it from the perspective of, like Arrow, for example, it took over 20 holes to tag, if I'm not mistaken. Again, James, you were there. Correct me if that's wrong. Maybe it took more.
Hole 21.
Hole 21. There you go. Over 20 holes. Means I read.
Should have been our second.
Well, but now that you're talking about multiple different targets here, was it 6, if I'm not mistaken? How do you manage all of that without going too quickly or too slowly? How do you go quickly enough? And how do you prioritize targets here? Again, given that you have a bit more, or you're gonna have a bit more money now that if the merger closes, but not unlimited money, so you still have to pay attention to that. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, so one of the things we have a lot of targets that have sandstone cover. And so we know that in the Athabasca, a lot, not all, because Arrow is not that the case, but most deposits that are very large in the Athabasca have that sandstone cover, and they're actually at that contact between that sandstone and underlying. And so the first prioritization is that. We want to basically look at the highest grade potential targets. And then just like the Athabasca, the Athabasca uses their graphite conductors, which are just fault zones, gravity, other methods to kind of highlight alteration and stuff like that. And we're doing the same thing. We don't have the graphite, so we can't use EM to hone into the faults, but we use other methods like magnetics, and resistivity basically to hone into the fault. So we have kind of similar kind of like really like large fault corridors. That's kind of the next priority. And then on those main corridors or subsidiary corridors, we look at gravity and other, smaller scale geophysics to basically hone into the alteration. Mm-hmm. And then within that, we look at the ones that kind of where everything kind of lines up, and then working a lot with, James too, like because of his knowledge with Arrow and with the Ackio and other things, using gravity as well, kind of using that perspective too to kind of see if we have similarities and other kind of targets with those methods.
Yeah. What's the mineralogy looking like up there?
For the uranium mineralization? Yeah, it's fairly clean. So at least so far with, Kigavik and with the stuff that we've looked at and discovered at Tadagak and Kavik, it's largely uraninite. So just UO2 pitch blend, which is just that with a little bit of extras in it, or coffinite, which is a uranium silicate. Yeah, so fairly simple mineralogy, and even the geochem as well.
So it's not much different than what you're dealing with down there in the Athabasca Basin, is it, James?
No different at all. Even the chemical signatures that we're looking for in the Athabasca are all identical in the Thelon. What we use the baselode as geochemical pathfinders. We applied that same process to the Aberdeen project, and it highlighted the deposits they've already discovered. It has highlighted areas that are definitely worthy of following up, and that's where Loki comes in, which is the first drill area. Everything works. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel on this. We're not trying to learn something new. This is all everything that we know and have done over the years, just applying it to a different project.
What about the lithology there, and specifically in the context of the presumed traps here? I mean, granite, graphitic peelite, or something else? What does that look like?
Largely, not a lot of graphite up there. So that's the only kind of main difference, is that we don't have a lot of graphite, but we still have kind of, what we call peelite, so metasedimentary rocks, so peelite, samopeelite. So we're looking at those types of kind of sediments, metasediments or basement rock, and then granite. So we do have some kind of younger granites that kind of cut through the area, and a lot of the deposits to date anyway, especially what Orano has, are kind of associated near the contact with kind of smaller granite bodies and those metasedimentary rocks.
What about the age difference between the two, and not between the two of you, because clearly, James, that's about 40 years of a difference there. But what about the age difference of the rocks and the basins? How old are they?
The basins themselves are exact same age. So the Athabasca Basin is same age, same setting. That they were deposited. They could have been actually connected. So there's some ideas that they actually were connected at one time and it's just been eroded. But they certainly were deposited at the same time. And then, the basement rocks are a little different. And so we don't have the Wollaston, that really nice Wollaston group. So it's just another, metasedimentary belt that's a little bit older.
Again, you go back to old school thinking in the Athabasca, and everyone. When I first joined in 2006, I was constantly told, Western Wollaston, Lower Wollaston, that's where you want to be. Next thing you know, you've got discoveries being made in Mujaddick, which is west of the Wollaston. You've got these potential discoveries occurring in the eastern Wollaston, and now you've got discoveries on the far west-hand side of the province, which are completely different rock types.
Yeah.
They're all structurally controlled with the right fluids. As long as that basin was there, the right fluids are mobilizing.
Well, what do you know about the structure up in the Thelon? Because as far as I understand it, there's far less known about the Thelon than it is for the Athabasca Basin. So what your thesis is then it's the same structural controls as what's controlling Athabasca mineralization?
Structuralopolis.
Yeah.
What's that?
Structuralopolis.
Okay.
That's what Aberdeen is. It is endowed with structures.
Okay. So how do you deal with that? Do you just drill straight down, or would you have to figure out, dip and everything else to go with the structure? Does that make it more complicated given that there's more structure? Or like how do you determine sort of the dip and everything?
A lot of the structures are very subvertical. So basically, you want to drill across them at a bit of an angle. But they're complicated. They're structural zones. They're not just a line. So some of the, like at Tadagak, that whole half a kilometer that has the anomaly within it is a fault zone in its own right. The fault is ripping through there and in the kind of multiple kind of fault, I guess, traces or whatever. So anyways, but like James said, structuralopolis, I guess, but it's full of structures and different, basically kind of east-northeast big corridors that, we're moving. If you go back and you look at the whole kind of, northern Canada as a whole, these structural corridors, the same ones in the Athabasca and the same ones in the Thelon, they're all moving at the same time in the past, like based on the whatever, all the big tectonic, that's a big word, things that were going on at that time. So it's, looks a little different. Some of the orientations are a little different, but that whole system was active. And it's the reason why the uranium fluids were remobilized and essentially those deposits were formed.
It'd be interesting if you eventually end up figuring out how it got formed in the first place, because as far as I understand it, nobody really agrees on how the Athabasca Basin got formed in the first place still. So it'll be interesting if the drilling gives you any insights into that. But to be fair, I've been out of my depth the moment I asked you about mineralogy there. So I'm going to have to shut up now. Otherwise, everyone's going to recognize that I have no idea what I'm asking about. But what are you doing this year?
Read more books.
Exactly. I only have two. So, what are you doing this year, though?
Books.
You said you're going to be, or you are drilling. There was a recent news release. What is it exactly that you're doing this year at Aberdeen?
So basically, we've just opened our camp. So the camp's open, operational, and basically bringing in the drillers and the geos at the end of this week. And so hopefully drilling, shortly after the following week. And so the plan is we got a couple months. So, kind of the window to do exploration up there is basically the summer. So in ideal conditions, it's kind of June through September. So you got kind of a 4-month window. We're a little behind because the deal just went through, or at least the agreement of doing it has gone through. And so yeah, we have July and August for sure, and a little bit of September. We'll see how the weather goes. So 7,000 meters, hoping. So kind of similar to what, we did last year, what Form did last year. And, and testing, maybe 20 drill holes, 25 drill holes, depending. And the targets, we don't know. Could be up to 10 targets, but it really depends on results and what we see.
Okay. So 20 to 25 holes, 300 meters average depth, something like that. It's what you're targeting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is that all just kind of the same holes, 250 to 300 meters depth, or are you going to have a couple of deeper ones as well?
Depending on results. Like we definitely, what we see dictates how deep we drill. And so, okay. Yeah.
Well, given
a lot of our,
go ahead.
Just a lot of our targets, like with the sandstone is very shallow for the most part. So it's, under 100 or, under 200 meters. So definitely to that depth to basically get into the basement. And then it's essentially what we see. If it's still altered, we keep drilling. If it's stick rock, we move on.
What about the, because you mentioned, structuralopolis there, having a lot of structure faults and everything. Is that going to complicate your drilling conditions? And are you risking a lot of core loss? Is that something you've dealt with before?
Yeah, I mean, that and the alteration. So yeah, the faults can be tricky, but, we drill slow, use lots of water. And our drillers are quite familiar now and really good. Like Chattagak is just a mess to drill, because it's so much clay, so much broken core. So I think, we've had a couple years of kind of training our drill crew on how to drill that complex rock. And so, yeah, I think we can do quite good this year.
What are your drilling costs up there?
In the last few years, over 1,000. Per meter. But I mean, now with scale, our camps, fully constructed, we have kind of everything in place, getting down to 800 a meter, I think is reasonable. And with more scale, if we ever got more drills and so on, it's really about scale. We can bring that down even further.
It's so heli supported.
If we can harness the power of mosquitoes, then we can replace the helicopter.
Yeah.
But that's a task in itself.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask. Not about the mosquitoes, but about the helicopters. If it's all heli supported, I would have assumed it is. What's the drill season though? Because you said winters potentially for Ackio. Is that because of the weather?
Yeah. So you can explore in Nunavut in the winter, but you need to have an established sort of project. So like the mine sites, of course, that are up there, they work all year round. Yeah. But you need roads. You're not going to want to do that in the winter. So essentially, like I said, we drill basically June, July, August, September. That's kind of the really nice window. And you can do a lot in 4 months. So, So it's not a problem. You don't need to be drilling all year round to be able to advance and be successful in these projects.
I don't doubt that. I mean, I've seen a documentary on Diavik, and people make that work too, right? As long as it's economic, you make it work. What I'm really thinking about here is from the perspective of news releases, how do you not go without sort of a dry period? And I suppose that's where your Ackio and everything else comes in then.
Yeah. So I mean for newsflow, yeah, we're very busy in the summer, and then yeah, Ackio and James can speak to this more maybe on what we're thinking there. But yeah, you can have a winter project. We also have an option. So we're currently optioning off our Northwest Athabasca project. So it's another quite remote project, kind of in the northwest quadrant. So again, it's kind of another, you know, basically a little bit harder to access, but it's definitely one that you can do in the winter. And last year we were drilling there. So that's another avenue for news flow and for discovery potential for us as
Right.
well.
Well, and James, we'll definitely get to Ackio here in a second. What about permitting up there, though, Rebecca? The only example again I could think of is Kigavik, but that didn't go exactly smoothly, right? So, what are your expectations for permitting up there? Are you fully permitted for the drill program? But also, moving on, if this is going to be economic, it also has to be permittable. So, talk to me about permitting up there.
For exploration, like we spent a lot of like I'm very familiar with the kind of permitting process in Nunavut. And so it can be quite lengthy, it can be 3 months to a year to kind of to permit it. But then you can get, a five-year permit. So you're covered for a long time. If you know the process, it's quite straightforward. And so we have all our permits for another several years. We have really good relationships with the community. We spent a lot of time working on that. And then so we're good for permitting. But comment on Arano's thing. I mean, they were all good for permitting as well. And I mean, just to kind of address, some of people's ideas there that their project, didn't go forward because the permitting process, didn't go through. It really was just what happened was, they went through all the steps and it got to this kind of stage where it's like, okay, well, you need to tell us when you want to start development. And it's like the Nunavut government, and the permitters, the regulators. And basically it was post Fukushima, everything was in the tank. And so Arano wouldn't commit to a timeline. And so the government of Nunavut and the regulators were like, well, we can't give you a mining permit if you're not going to commit to a timeline. And so that was really all it was. And Arano stood firm and said, well, we don't want to make a timeline. So that's why that basically broke down. It wasn't because none of it was against uranium mining or the regulators were against it. It was all very positive. It was just kind of a administrative thing. And so anyways, that's just some background on that.
Yeah.
And if they would have committed to a timeline, I believe the project would have maybe even went ahead. They could have just kind of delayed it and said, okay, well, obviously right now we can't. But who knows? There could have been, a mine up there by now.
What about that relationship with the local communities that you said, First Nations? How many of them own the land essentially that you're working on, and do you have those agreements in place?
Yeah, so kind of the beauty of Nunavut is that, when Nunavut became a territory, they settled their land claims. And so they basically did all that front work up front. And so basically they've divvied up the territory into kind of Inuit-owned land, which is administered by the Inuit organizations, and Crown land. And so basically there's no surprises. Like when you go stake ground, you're staking Inuit-owned land or you're staking Crown land, and then you permit accordingly. So if you're Inuit-owned, you permit through the Nunavut or Inuit organizations. If it's Crown, it's through the government organizations. And so there really isn't any surprises there. There's no additional agreements you need. And they're all very, kind of, as long as you do stuff sustainably and you're cognizant of some of their concerns as far as, wildlife and community, basically that permitting process, no matter what type of ground that your claims are on, is fairly straightforward.
Well, talk to me about that as well. I mean, caribou or other wildlife, what are you dealing with up there?
So our area, it's definitely caribou. It's the barren land caribou migrate and move throughout the whole territory of Nunavut, but in particular, like our project area is an area where you have caribou. So we basically have caribou monitors that we have in camp. And we have, different kind of rules based if you have like a big herd or you have caribou calves in the area. We have different kind of basically rules so that we're minimizing disturbance, stuff like that. But there's no blackout period when we can explore. It's just being cognizant of that, documenting it, and making sure we're minimizing our disturbance as much as we can. Yeah.
So where does that leave you in terms of, again, your news this year, having said everything here, when do you think you're going to have the first assays?
So assays, who knows? I mean, we're both James and James had got his assays way later than us, and we got ours in January. So who knows? But I'm hoping, the labs have their stuff together a bit better, but we'll start drilling in early July or kind of early to mid-July. And then probably have the first shipment of samples, out at the end of the month or by August, and then it can take a month after that. So for actual assays, I would say not till the fall.
Is it is it much longer than what it would be in the Athabasca Basin?
No, it's the same lab. I mean, the only difference is it's getting it out. So basically shipping, we want to minimize or like kind of you want to ship more en masse than just kind of trickling out pails of rock that could get lost or just, you don't want to have a charter with 3 pails on it. So anyway, but I mean, we can present our, scintillometer results. We have downhole probes and stuff like that, and we can be on that if we have interesting rock, you'll be sure to know.
Okay, so
we'll have so many assays that we'll bring the lab up to us.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Actually, is do you think there's anything else you can do in the meantime to slow it up and again keep the market engaged? Because if you were to close this deal and then disappear for 3 months, I mean not going to be great from the market perspective. So how do you keep the market engaged in the meantime?
I think, videos like this, I mean, are able to keep people up to date with our videos, with our results, be more keyed into that. Probably even, have some more videos of the Aberdeen, show kind of what we're doing up there. Because again, it's a little different. I mean, it's the same exploration as exploration, but it's the tundra. It's quite beautiful up there and just kind of show what we're doing, stuff like that.
Okay. What about given the logistics and everything you've told me of the Thelon so far versus again the logistics of the eastern side of the Athabasca Basin, what's the profile of a discovery that we're here and thinking about it? So both tonnage and grade, what's a uranium deposit that actually look like here?
Well, I mean, we don't know exactly, but I think, what we're trying to find and we're trying to promote is that, over 100 million pounds or multi-hundred million pounds. Like that's a tall order, of course. But that's what it's like go big or go home. I mean, that's what we're looking to find up there. And if you do even just the probability math on the Athabasca, you've got several of those deposits kind of found already. There's still tons of potential in the Athabasca, but you already have not many, but you probably have a good 6, greater than 100 million pound deposits and some of those monsters like Cigar and MacArthur. And what you don't have in the Thelon is any of them. But you have the same sort of geology. You got the same, obviously the processes are there. Otherwise Tadagak and Kavik wouldn't exist or Oranos deposits. So the system's there. It's just kind of the probability where's the big one? Where are the big ones? So anyways, size, as far as grade, I mean, we already have, Tadagak has grades up to 24%, over small intervals. But it's definitely there. So we'll see. I mean, like James has kind of pointed out, I mean, the arrow model, those types of grades, I would say are probably up there.
It'll be interesting to follow along with this and have better conversations as time goes and as I get to know this project better over time. James, on to you though. What's the plan for Hook? Is there any definitive decisions as to what you want to do there?
No definitive decisions. What I want to do there is see that clay alteration area drilled. The idea that we were leading to this summer, if this deal hadn't gone through, is that we would have gone back to Hook and drilled off the clay alteration, just drilled at depth. Our target area for those holes, though, are anywhere between 400 and 700 meters, where we think that we would tag mineralization potential. So we're starting to get it a little bit deeper. That's where we figured that really the merging our flagship with Forum's flagship provided that opportunity for that longevity and that continuous news flow. If you can, investors are patient for 6 to 9 months, you can have a lot of steady news coming out of this and hopefully big news throughout the entire way. We did not fully intend to go back to Ackio as our drill program last year. I think not going to say we killed it. There are some targets that we would have to follow up with, especially near surface or at that overburden contact for pod 7 to try to hit the higher grades that we're seeing there up at that contact. Mm-hmm. But the intention was really to find something new and build on what already existed at Ackio, just again looking for more and bigger and building the jurisdiction. One deposit on its own, being Ackio, was not enough to build the jurisdiction in that area.
So does that take off the possibility of a resource on Hook by the end of this year off the table?
More than likely, but that'll be a Geiger decision moving forward.
Why don't you JV or option out Hook as it is? I think, looking at your properties, that's probably going to be the most painful decision there, especially for you, but it is also the most advanced property. So probably carries the largest, the highest dollar value in a JV or an option agreement.
Yeah, good possibility. But again, I think we're only 3 holes away from making a discovery there. If that alteration does yield fruit, I think we would tag it very closely. Or very quickly, sorry, not closely, but I think we'd take it very quickly with the next drill program that happens on the project. So it's worth the company, Baselode, Geiger, it's worth the company pursuing it on our own.
Right. What about the other projects? Because you've got 4 of them in total in Baselode right now as it is. What do you do with the rest of them?
That's one of the fortunate things about this whole merger is that Forum's projects and our projects combined, we have about 500,000 hectares across both basins, and they're all in good standing. There's no rush to work on anything in these projects. We've got a lot of projects that have a lot of potential. They do require some more work geophysically and drilling wise, but we've identified the flagships that can keep things going. The other projects, those could be the potential for JVs or whatever. But the other projects, they're all good to stay as they are. They need Catharsis needs a little bit more geophysics, and then I think that defines the next drill program, and same with Bear.
Rebecca, what about yourself? What do you think of working on Hook? Is that something you as a new CEO would want to do, or do you feel more like, optioning it out if you had it your way?
I think I agree with James. So, I mean, it's a high priority project. I would like to work it, and work it ourselves. Like, yeah. And all those other projects we have, several now that in combination, and those are the ones to JV out, just kind of like we did with the Northwest Athabasca project.
Okay. What are you guys going to be budgeting for G&A on Geiger? Is that too early to speak about, or what are you thinking in terms of G&A?
I mean, I don't have a value for you now, but I mean, I'd like to keep it lean. Baselode always kept their stuff very lean. Forum kept lean. I think yeah, I think in the similar range, smart marketing. We have a lot of with the OR group. What's really like great for us, like for Forum, is that, with the OR group, you have kind of that shared G&A, which is very great. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Hmm. What about marketing? What do you is anything going to change in the way you market? I know the org group does, its own videos and everything, and you do conferences and you do a combination of digital, like most companies out there. But what are you thinking in terms of marketing? Is there anything going to change here?
Still to be determined, but I kind of like how the org group does it. Keep it lean. Talking about the geology, kind of deep dives that are our own. Mixed in with it. Stuff like yourself and a few other people. But yeah, I like it lean. Get the message out, and yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I've been through sort of the basics here. It was, it's a good catch up to go through the transaction. This does leave the door open to a lot more conversation later down the road, and I'm hoping we'll be able to do that sometime soon. What am I forgetting to ask you though? What did both of you come here hoping to talk about that I failed to bring up? And again, Rebecca, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you failed. We talked about a lot of things. Yeah, I mean, I want people to be excited about this deal. I'm very excited about this deal. I see the potential, like I said, just the building blocks for Forum. We needed a change. Like we need to get bigger, to be more relevant, to attract, more investors and just get that, momentum. And so this allows us to rejuvenate. And then, being able to explore, like for me, to explore the Aberdeen project and give, the more drill holes we can get into that project, that's the more discovery potential. And I mean, I'm pretty laser focused on that. And I do feel very strongly that it's the place we want to be. It's like James says, it's like being in the Athabasca in the 1960s. And I think, with another drill program and this sort of partnership, we can actually maybe make that happen.
James, what about yourself? What do you want to add here at the end?
I actually want to ask you, at the beginning of the talk, you said that you weren't convinced about this. Have we done enough to convince you, or at least start swaying your opinion or giving a positive outlook on the situation?
I said I was surprised, not necessarily not convinced. I think in general, my opinion doesn't necessarily matter. I think the drill bit is going to do that. I mean, the logistics up there are challenging, as you said, and something remarkable is going to have to come out of the ground to, make up for everything that's going on. And in the end, I think exploration is often a rather binary business. So if you end up making a spectacular discovery, the price move that happened on the first day after the announcement, or on the first day on the announcement of this potential merger, everyone's going to forget that. But in the same time, if the discovery is not there, then again, it's binary. So you live and die by the drill bit. I think Chairman Stephen Stewart has also said that before, and again, it's hard to say what happens here. So again, challenging logistics up there. It's not cheap drilling and everything. And we'll have to see what comes out of the ground this year. Nothing's really ever perfect in the end. So I understand you've come here to present a bullish story. You're both bullish on it. Otherwise, you don't go through with it. But what keeps you up at night? There's risks and challenges with everything. James, this time we'll start with you. What keeps you up at night?
A hip injury and an ankle injury. They're kind of sore and really irk me when I try to sleep. Nothing really. If anything, I'm just excited to see some of the results from these drill bits, some of these targets we're putting together. You just said it yourself. We live and die by the drill bit. You've got two really passionate and well-educated geologists who know this craft behind this drill program, and I think that's the big excitement. That's what's going to keep me up until we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think we could hit this big deposits. So that's what we're aiming for, and we hit. I still won't sleep.
Rebecca, what about yourself? What keeps you up at night?
Well, I think a lot of things were keeping me way more up at night before this merger. So I think, now that, we have a path forward with the Aberdeen project, we can actually get results, can again live and die by the drill bit. You die a lot quicker when you don't have a drill going. So yeah, I think for me, I'm sleeping a lot more soundly. But geology is what it is. It's exploration for a reason. I do hope that we can show that this is a really good place to be.
Well, essentially, also what I'm getting from this is why the merger would make sense. From what you're giving me here as answers is that from Forum's perspective, it makes sense in terms of capital and the access to capital right now. And then from Baselode's perspective, it makes sense because you think that's what's going to create more value in the stock, making a new discovery in the larger discovery. Is that, am I summarizing it correctly?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, again, I'm looking forward to more conversations in the future. Thank you so much, both, for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Antonio.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they're necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias. Again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should under no circumstances be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. Also, unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special or consequential or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."